going to hear an overview from KDHE and the Bureau of Air Management. Is Rick online?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So, committee, it just kind of be an open forum. If you have questions, we'll try to keep it orderly the best we can and ask Rick some questions or anybody in the room. So, Rick, do you have anything you'd like to say to open up the meeting?
I just wondered, does the individual who is doing the graphics there, do they want me to control it from my computer, or do I just say, please advance to the next graphic, or what is going to be the easiest? I believe you're muted, Mr. Chairman.
If you could go ahead and show what you can, at least people in the room who don't have it could see what you're talking about.
Terrific. I certainly will. Thank you.
So, Rick, whenever you're ready, I'm going to let you just go ahead.
Okay. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing that presentation at the present time?
No, sir.
You are not. Okay. Let me do something else. All right, let's try that. Is that better?
Yep.
Okay. Well, now that we got all of the technical difficulties worked out, we can start talking about the business at hand. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity, and members of the committee to give us this opportunity to lay out for you the Bureau of Air Emissions fees and how we go about collecting those and so forth. So let me just real quickly introduce myself. My name is Rick Brunetti. I'm the director for the Bureau of Air. We are in the Division of Environment that is led by our Deputy Secretary, Leo Henning, who is also on the line this afternoon. And I want to start with a couple of quick graphs. I've got a feeling you have probably seen these before, but if you haven't, they are awfully nice pieces of information to have. The first one that you see on the screen there is the total amount of electricity that is generated from two different sources. As you can see, the blue line is from coal, from our coal-fired power plants, and the orange line is from wind. As you can see, wind surpasses coal in about June of 2018. I'm not sure whether everybody in the state of Kansas is aware of this or not, but wind continues to be a big player in the market as it pertains to electricity. What you see on the screen right now is the total amount of emissions, air emissions, that have been generated from 1990, from when we started this program in 1990, to the past year where we have quality assured data, which was 2019. As you can see, when we first started this program, we had approximately 430,000 tons per year of air pollutants being emitted into the atmosphere. The last year, in 2019, we had 80,000 tons. So what we have seen in a matter of essentially 29 years is an 81% drop in the total air emissions for the state of Kansas, which is absolutely remarkable. One of the concerns with that, and I'll talk about it, and we'll talk about it as we go further, is that the Clean Air Act was set up so that states were paid by the facilities that are emitting these emissions. They had to pay so many dollars per ton for every ton of emission that they emitted. So what you see there is essentially an 81% drop in the emissions. I look at that and I say that's an 81% in the drop of the total amount of money that we get paid on. So it is and really a little bit of a double-edged sword. What you see on your screen right now is essentially a few questions, and I wanted to kind of lead off with this morning after looking at, or this afternoon after looking at those two graphs. When we had one of our stakeholder meetings, when we had gotten a number of our stakeholders together to discuss how do we come about, or how do we forge some type of a solution to this where we continue to see the air emissions go down. But the amount of work, and I'll touch on this a little later during the course of this presentation, but the work does not seem to at all. And so at the present time, the department, or the Bureau of Air, only has Class 1 emission fees, which are the largest emitters of air pollution. Good examples: electric generating stations, refineries, cement kilns. Those are the large facilities that emit significant amounts of what we call criteria pollutants, and those are what we get paid on. The Class 2s are the smaller facilities. They're maybe the engines that are used as backups by municipalities across the state for electrical generation in case there's a major malfunction in the electrical system. Those are some of the things, and to give you an idea, 1,000 tons a year is the criteria pollutant threshold for Class 1 permits. 100 tons a year is the threshold for the Class 2s. But when we got together, getting back to what's on the screen right now, when we got together with the stakeholders earlier in the year, one of the things that we asked essentially three questions. And the first question we asked was, do you want the fee structure implemented through regulation or statute? And about 69% of those that responded said they wanted it in regulation. Secondly, we asked the question, do you want a cap set on fees by statute? And as you can see, a significant number, 93% of those said yes, that would be their preference. And then finally, the last question we had was, do stakeholders support KDHE administering the air quality program in Kansas over EPA? And as you can see, there was overwhelming support for KDHE continuing to run this program. What you see on your screen now is is where the department, or where the Bureau, gets its revenue from. You will see we have four major sources of funding. The Air Quality Fee Fund, which is in the dark blue there, comes in at about 76% of our total funding. We have two EPA grants, the Federal 103 grant and the Federal 105 grant, that is about 22 to 23% of our funding. And then finally, we have a little bit of state general fund that we utilize in order to run the asbestos program out of the Bureau of Air. Secondly, we want to look at the expenditures. Essentially, okay, we saw where the money came from. Where does it go? As you can see, the vast majority of that goes to salaries for the individuals that run this program. Secondly, we have some aid to locals. Mainly, it's the Kansas City area, the Wichita area. They do a lot of air work for us. Kansas State University, Mid-America Regional Council, some of the smaller groups, but they put in a lot of work for us in regards to pollution within their designated municipalities. And then we also have our transfers and indirects. Essentially, that is what we utilize to run the administration of this particular agency, to run the Office of Legal Services and the Office of Personnel Services, to pay for the buildings and those types of things. And then in addition to that, and finally, we have outlay, which is how we buy our equipment that we monitor the air with. How do we buy our personal protective equipment? How do we pay for vehicles? How do we pay for travel? All of that is in the outlays. What you see now is essentially where we are on staffing, and the Bureau has three sections within it. We have the compliance and enforcement section, which is kind of self-explanatory. We have the permitting section, again, kind of self-explanatory. They're the one that issue the permits that allow facilities to operate within Kansas. And planning and monitoring and data. Those are the folks that go out and run our ambient air monitoring equipment. They're the ones that do the planning on these types of things. When is the Bureau going to run out of money? They, do planning on all sorts of things. How do we reduce emissions so that all of the areas of the state of Kansas stay in compliance with the national ambient air quality standards? What you see now is essentially a map of the state of Kansas, so you can see that's pretty evident. But I don't know if you knew that we had a vast array of air quality monitoring stations throughout the state of Kansas. And we test for all kinds of different things, mainly to assure that we are in compliance with what are called, again, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. These are the standards, the numbers that EPA has put in place, essentially that says if you are at or below that number, then the people that are breathing that air are safe from any ill health effects. So, and I am very pleased to tell you that the state of Kansas, with the exception of a very small 1 square mile area in the Salina area, is in attainment for all of the ambient air quality standards. The Salina monitor, it is a 3-year standard, the lead standard is, and at present time, we are in compliance with the National Ambient Air Quality Standard for that particular monitor, and we are working with EPA as we speak in order to get that area back into attainment. So when we are back in attainment in Salina, we are in total compliance with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. I talked a little bit about this just briefly. Let me touch on these. These are what are called the criteria pollutants that we're required to test for. These were all federally mandated. So if we did not do the testing, EPA would be required to come in and do the testing. A significant number of them there. Some of the other federal mandates that we have, some of the things you may have heard of, some of them potentially not. Regional haze, greenhouse gases, probably you all certainly aware of. Interstate transport. So how is air that we're getting from Oklahoma or air that we're getting from Missouri impacting what the ambient air in Kansas looks like, and vice versa? Well, the air that Missouri gets from Kansas or from Oklahoma gets from Kansas, what kind of impacts are those having? The cross-state air pollution rule, which I am happy to announce that we had been in that particular rule for a number of years, but due to some significant work that the facilities had done, we have moved out of reach for that particular federal rule. In addition to that, we do a lot of other things in regards to air permitting, as I mentioned, monitoring, record keeping, of course, performance tests on equipment. How do you know that a piece of equipment, a piece of pollution control equipment is working? to the standards that the facility says it is. And the simple answer is you go out and performance test it. We do inspections. Our district offices do a significant number of inspections to assure that the facilities are in compliance. And then finally, we do some permitting and technical assistance. That's essentially if an individual out in the field has got a question or a permit holder, they can pick up the phone and give us a call. I had mentioned earlier, before I go to this next slide, I had mentioned earlier that we have seen an 81% reduction in emissions. Intuitively, you would say, if you've got an 81% reduction in emissions, certainly you've got 81% less of the work to do. Well, I had talked about the federally mandated standards earlier in regards to the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. I want to talk a little bit about permitting, and that's what the next slide is going to show you. We started off this slide in 2000, and we go to 2019. As this is where essentially we saw the vast amount of, or the vast proportion of the decreases in the amount of the total emissions going down. But what did we see here? What we see here from the standpoint of, is a facility required to get a permit or not, or how many Class 1 and Class 2 facilities do we have across the state? Actually, both of those has increased. In 2000, we had 230 Class 1 permits. In 2019, we had 258. So we increased that by 28. The Class 2s went from 467 to 663. So you can see that, yes, we have had a significant decrease in the amount of emissions, but just simply from that slide, you can see that we have increased the number of permits, both for Class 1s and Class 2s. We have also been doing some significant outreach with a number of our facilities in regards to how do we come up with a solution to fixing the problem when we get paid on emissions and our emissions are continuing to decrease as quickly as they are. So we wanted to get together a group of folks, a group of about 15 folks that we essentially span across where we are, Class 1s and Class 2s from all different sectors. And in addition to this, we've also had, in addition to the meetings that you see there, we've also had 4 of those in 2021. Well, what we heard from the sources was that the criteria fee, or essentially the amount of dollars that is spent per ton of emission, that is the top line that you see there, and presently we're at $53 per ton. Another idea that was thrown around was a consumer price index that may be indexed from potentially the first 3 to 5 years of the new fee structure. We also had a HAP fee. A HAP is a hazardous air pollutant, and it is significantly more regulated than a criteria pollutant. Excuse me. Than a criteria pollutant, mainly because it is more toxic. A good idea, or a good example of a hazardous air pollutant would be asbestos, for example. In addition to this, we also threw out the idea of a Class 1 base fee. That is, every Class 1 facility pays this amount of money per year, no matter, or in addition to essentially what they pay on their criteria fee. And we also had a Class 2 base fee. We asked the various facilities that we had gathered to essentially do some voting for us, and what was reached upon was that the option 2 that you see there, the criteria fee of $53 per ton, a consumer price index of 1.5%, HAP fee, again, a hazardous air pollutant fee of $150 a ton, as opposed to the 53 that you pay for the criteria pollutant, and then a base fee for both class 1s and class 2s at $850. One of the other questions that we had asked during the course of these initial meetings with our stakeholders was, should there be, maybe a legislative cap isn't a good idea. Maybe it's an on-off switch that, but we asked them, should we have one of those in statute? And what we heard from our sources is yes, that we should. And so, of course, the next question is, so where does the on-off switch, where does it change? And some of the ideas that were mentioned were $6 million. So if we, well, let's just go to the next slide. It's a little more, that gives you a little more information. This, what you're looking at there, is essentially what we saw, or is essentially a historic, as it mentions, an air quality fee fund carryover. So what was the balance on the first bar that you see there would have been January 1st of 2003. And so we are working with our stakeholders. In addition, I am working with senior management and so forth in order to try and come up with a number that is comfortable for the sources as well as for us, so that we can continue to run the program like the sources want to, but while at the same time not having significant quantities of money in there as we move forward. What you see on your screen right now is essentially what our air quality fee fund looks like when, or as we move forward. What the line over on the left-hand side is essentially where we are right now, February of 2021, March, April, something of that nature. And what we see is that probably most likely in FY and state fiscal year 2025, or about October of 2024, this particular fund is going to run out of money. And that is why, we are doing the planning and talking to our sources now, and talking to you as well, so that we don't get to that point, because at that point, when the air quality fee fund runs out of money, that is when essentially the federal government would come in and take it over. I'm kind of gonna finish up, finish up where I started, and I hope you do remember this slide in regards to the total number of emissions. But one of the other things that I will add, that back in 1990, when we were first putting this program together, the class 1 sources at the time said, no, we really don't need to bring the class 2s in. Let's just have the class 1s pay all of the emission fees in order to run the program. Well, in 1990, as you can, again, from the graph, in 1990, class 2 facilities, or the smaller facilities, emitted 1 in every 43 tons of air pollutants in the country, or pardon me, in the state. Today, that number is 1 in 8 tons. So you can see what the class 1s are saying. It's time for, it is time for a more expanded approach of this, and bringing the class 2s in. What you see now is essentially how the air fee fund has been utilized over the years in order to, number one, increase the cost per ton of criteria pollutants for the class ones, while at the same time we are trying to stay within within an amount that allows us to run the program, but does not essentially have exorbitant amounts of money in that fund as well. Finally, I wanted to show you how Kansas compares, pretty much in a nutshell, how we compare with some of our neighboring states as it pertains to the total air program and the total number of employees that we have. I hope that you can see that that we try to be, certainly I try to be, I know my deputy secretary does as well, tries to be very efficient with the utilization of the money that we have. As you can see, with in comparison to the neighboring states, we have the lowest budget. We do not have the lowest number of employees. However, one of the things that I will add about Nebraska is that the city, or pardon me, the counties that the cities of Lincoln and Omaha are in, run their own program that is directly overseen by EPA. So Nebraska does not have those. The state of Nebraska does not have oversight of those two metropolitan areas. So again, I will let the graph speak for itself. I am hoping that I left, hopefully I left enough time, Mr. Chairman, to be able to address any questions that the members of the committee may have. And so I will turn it back to you, and I will stand for questions at your pleasure.
Thank you, Rick. Does the committee have any questions? Representative Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick, thanks for the presentation. Couple quick questions. Number one, on your graph, last graph, you're showing the amount of employees. I believe it shows 62. And then on one of your earlier graphs, you were showing 55 and with 9 vacant. Tell me what's going on there, why the difference?
You bet. The difference is on the final graph. We were including in the earlier graph, we were only including individuals that worked in the Bureau of Air. In the final graph that you see, where we are looking at how many employees it took to run the air program, we had to bring in those employees from the Bureau of Environmental Fuel Services that work out in our district offices, that go about and do our inspections. So we had to bring those in order to adequately show essentially the number of folks that it takes to operate this program.
Okay, just a follow-up, Mr. Chairman, if I might. The 55 that you were showing on the earlier graph, if I can get to that, so that would not include those folks. And also, you're showing 9 vacancies. How long have you been short of those 9 vacancies?
Yeah, to answer your question, we have had 8 resignations since March of 2020. So since the pandemic has hit, we have had 8 resignations. Okay. I had some concerns about filling those positions immediately due to the fact that we did not know what kind of an impact this pandemic is going to have. But certainly we are looking at filling those positions, and hopefully we will be able to get those posted fairly quickly.
And just one other quick one. I believe you were showing, and I know I'll turn it over to, I'm sure there's other questions. I believe I saw that the recommendation was option 2?
That is correct.
on the outreach, or that's what a preliminary agreement that everybody wants to look at option 2, they believe is the best option, correct?
Well, that was essentially the choice of the majority of the folks that were at that meeting.
Okay, and so do we have a budget or line item that shows option 2 with all the fee structures, projected fee structures?
I do not, but I could certainly get one of those done for you.
Well, I don't know. I'll just not ask for that right now.
Okay.
We'll go along. We'll go with other questions, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, we are certainly, Representative Gardner, we are certainly still in negotiations with our stakeholders, not only in regards to what fees that we want to put in or don't. As I mentioned before, one of the other key things is the legislative cap as well, or the legislative on-off switch, as we have called it.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one of my questions is, as we go forward on all these testing equipment stuff, is there new types of equipment that are more efficient and technology driven, like drones and things like that? Where are we at with updating technology? Because historically, the state's a little slow to change.
I will, or I'm happy to report you had mentioned drones, but we did a drone study in regards to the impact to the air quality as it pertains to the burning that is done in the Flint Hills, typically right around this time of year, and we are actually going to be doing another test somewhere between the third week of April and the end of April to do another one of those drone studies, and we are actually going to go out and do a patch burn, and so we know essentially what we're going to burn, and we want to develop a sense of the emissions that are coming off of those, so we can have a better idea in the future on how to estimate if you have this many thousand of acres of the Flint Hills burn, how much of an impact are you going to have? So we are moving. I think we're moving fairly quickly. One of the things that we're a little bit bogged down with in regards to the movement of technology is that we have to continue to utilize essentially equipment to monitor our ambient air that meets all of the appropriate standards that EPA and ASTM, the American Standard Testing Methods, had laid out for essentially the monitoring of those particular criteria pollutants. So, we are a little bit hamstrung on that, but we try to implement as much of the new technology as we possibly can.
So just to follow up on that, and thank you for that answer. But I live in those Flint Hills, and I've already checked the air quality. It's fine. So do you work with Extension? They're out there all the time monitoring those things also. We have all kinds of people monitoring that. I just wonder if maybe we're duplicating, and maybe there's other sources of that information that's already out there, or maybe you could provide some so we could, alleviate some of their costs. But it just that has been such a big issue, and there's a lot of people. I think they watch it really close in Lincoln, Nebraska. Maybe we could just check with them.
Yeah,
but I just wonder if we're not duplicating a lot of those efforts. Thank you.
Any more questions? Mr. Hoffman? Representative Hoffman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just trying to figure out so the air quality fee fund, you're saying that the revenues are about 4.5 million, or a little over 4.5 million. are the emissions fees and the base fees, the cap fee and all those, is that the only thing that funds that fund?
The only thing that funds it right now are emissions of criteria pollutants from class 1 sources.
Okay, there's no,
Okay.
there's not a base fee.
That is
They don't
correct.
have they don't have a base fee. And what is the per ton fee?
The per ton fee is $53 per ton.
Okay, all right,
Again, only for the class 1s, and if you're a class 2 facility at the present time, you do not pay emissions fees.
right, okay.
Okay?
All right, I'm just trying to, I've got.
Oh,
I've
absolutely.
got different numbers than what you have as far as the total expenditures, total revenue. And so I'm trying to figure out your numbers and the numbers that I've gotten from other items too. So it looks like that between 2020 and the 2021, I'm sorry, and the 2022 fiscal years, you're wanting to increase about $700,000 of revenue in that fund. Is that correct?
Well, what you're seeing there in regards to that, 700,000 is what we are required to budget, and we are required to budget or have the funds for essentially all of the positions being filled 100% over the entire span of that particular year. And so what we try to do is to always meet or sometimes be below those budget numbers, and consistently we have done that over the past several years. But the Department of Budget requires us to budget and have the funds for all of those positions at 100%.
Okay, let me ask a different way then.
Okay.
Without the fee increase, what would the revenue be between 21 and 22 for the air quality fund? Would it increase by 700,000?
No.
Okay.
My guess, it would be the amount would probably decrease in regards to revenues by approximately 1.5% to 2%, which is what we are seeing the class 1 facilities continue to decrease their
Which is how
emissions.
much? Which is how much? Without me having to figure the.
What, 200,000?
Okay. So I think that's the crutch of the issue that the reason why we're here, the reason why we're talking about this. You're looking at a $200,000 to $300,000 decrease in that fund, but yet you want to increase it by another $500,000 above that 300,000, or well, above that 200,000. You want to increase it by about 700,000. I would like to know why. Why all of a sudden do we need? You're saying that you had 8 vacancies in the last year. I can understand needing to refill those, but are you looking to hire more people for that 700,000?
No, sir, not at the present time. And actually, over the last year, we have eliminated 3 positions within the Bureau. So
Okay,
we try to be as physically responsible as we can. One of the main things we want, or one of the main reasons that we do this the way we do, is so that we don't have to go through the regulatory process every year or every 2 years. We are hoping to look at doing a regulatory change perhaps once in every 5 or once in every 6, because As was mentioned before, the fees are structured and are put in place by regulation. And so a regulation change in that particular regard takes a significant amount of time. And so we have to plan accordingly and make sure that that if we do those regulation changes, that that essentially they are worth our while and they.
Okay, I understand that. I
Okay.
understand, but in the proposal that I'm looking at, you're not even looking to do any of these increases until fiscal year 25 or 26. But yet, the expenditures in the same graph that I'm looking at are going up every year, starting 700,000 in 21, and then they go up about 70, 80,000 every year, all the way till you start hitting that. It looks like to me that they're going up, the expenditures are going up, and that's the reason why you're looking back, or 4 years from now. I want to know what expenditures that you're looking at that are $700,000 in 1 year. What are those expenditures that you feel like are just have to have in order to start? Basically, you're drawing down this fund to less money in the fund until these fees would maybe kick in finally in 24 or 25.
And as I mentioned, when we submit budgets, we are required to submit those budgets at all positions being 100% filled. And as I showed by one of the graphs earlier in this particular presentation, salaries are the main cost for this particular program. I'm not sure if it seems as
I look
though-
at budgets, I look at budgets all the time where there are there's vacant positions that there's no money for those vacant positions. I still go back to, you've had some of those vacant positions for quite a while. And so if you're saying what you're saying, you've had to budget for those for all these years too. You're not telling me why you need the $500,000 increase right now. And I'm sorry to be, this is just,
absolutely, I know
this is what is frustrating, and I know that the stakeholders are frustrated too about it.
Yeah.
And you look at, you say that this option 2 is what everybody wants, but the class 2s, they didn't vote on that, did they? Were they in the meeting and vote on that?
They were certainly in the meeting. I'm not sure whether they voted on it or not. It was certainly their prerogative to vote during the course of that meeting.
Well, I'll let someone else answer or ask some questions, but I really feel like that you need to provide exactly why you need the increase of 500,000 right now. What is so important that you need that right now?
And I just want to reemphasize that we do not plan on putting these fee increases in place until state fiscal year 2025.
Yeah, I know.
So we are trying
Okay,
to.
I'll let someone else ask some questions because I think we're going in circles here. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Hahn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the good news is we may be able to direct the Office of the Budget to make sure that we don't necessarily would need to have those, those positions filled. I don't know. So a couple questions. Could you please send us the list of the stakeholders that were at those meetings?
Absolutely.
I'd like to, I think it'd be interesting to hear directly from, is that me? Okay. So if you could send us a list of those stakeholders, that would be at those meetings you were mentioning, that would be great. The other thing is, so it's a great thing that these emissions have decreased, correct? Yes, sir? Yes? I'm going with your smile that that's a good thing.
Yes, it is.
Great.
I'm sorry, I apologize. My mute keeps turning itself on automatically. And so I have to, if I don't speak for a while, it automatically mutes me. So it
No,
must
you're,
think I'm way too windy, I guess.
no, no, sir, you're just fine. I see what you did there, though. Listen to that pun there. You're a little too windy. All right, so if air emissions have decreased, that's fantastic. On one of your slides, it says with fewer emissions, workload is the same or enhanced. Can you talk about how if y'all are doing your job and we're decreasing emissions and that's great, all of a sudden though, you still have the same workload? Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, we sure do. And one of the things that I will tell you is right after that slide, I had the total number of permits, the total number of air permits that are issued by the Bureau of Air. And as I mentioned, during the course, we went in class 1 facilities or the larger facilities from 2000 to 2019. We went from 230 to 258, so an increase of 28 class 1 permits. And we went from 467 to 663 on the class 2 permits. So so we've had a significant increase in the number of permits. So that tells you one thing. I'll touch on another one too. On the I had talked about earlier the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. In 2000, for example, the National Ambient Air Quality Standard, I'll just take 2 criteria pollutants. In 2000 for ozone, the criteria pollutant limit was 105 parts per billion. Today, it is 70. So a significant amount of work had to be done in order to decrease, in order to keep those ozone numbers down. Another good example, lead. In 2000, the lead National Ambient Air Quality Standard was 1.5 parts per million. Today, it is 0.15. It had decreased by a factor of 10. And so you have to go in and look at those facilities and determine where it is that you could potentially have impacts to the National Ambient Air Quality Standard so that you are sure and be protective of all of the individuals within the state of Kansas.
Thank you, sir. I guess I'm thankful. I'm so thankful that we've decreased air emissions. And I guess common sense would tell me if we're decreasing air emissions, then we may be able to decrease the government, because you're looking at more permits is a good thing, and I'm thinking more government is never a good thing. So if we're decreasing emissions, y'all are doing your job without even 9 positions being filled. Would there be a reason that we couldn't adjust and decrease the government, decrease your department instead of expanding?
Certainly a question that we look at every day. You know, can we do without this position? And certainly those are decisions that as a manager I deal with or grapple with every single day. And looking what's on the horizon for this new administration that has presently just come in Washington, you really have to sit back and ask yourself, you know, with the changes that they are trying to implement, you know, if we do have those positions, potentially, maybe they have to be redirected. So I think there's a lot of questions as it pertains to this particular program that are going to have to be asked and addressed in the next few years as it pertains to federal mandates that potential or have the potential to come down in the next few years.
Thank you so much. So the quick answer is, even though we've decreased emissions, the department has done their job, we cannot decrease the government, we cannot decrease the department.
we still have the same, actually, we have a greater number of permits that have to be issued and renewed, and performance testing has to be done upon, and we have lower national ambient air quality standards. So, you know, that's essentially the information that I have to work with and to base my decisions upon in regards to operating this particular this particular bureau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the report. You know, very interesting. A couple points that I've got is you mentioned that.
I'm sorry, Mr. Representative, I'm having some difficulty hearing you.
I'm sorry, I was
There you
not
go.
directing towards the mic.
Much
I
better.
apologize. One of the questions I've got is you mentioned in your presentation that municipalities help you out a lot too. And I'll expand on that just a little bit too, for me. And I'm not sure I understand that.
Okay. Certainly. For example, within the air program, actually, Wyandotte County and Johnson County both have air programs. Wyandotte County has a complete air program with the exception of monitoring and the exception of compliance and enforcement. So Wyandotte County does all of their permitting, does all of their air permitting, and they also do all of their own inspections. Johnson County only does inspections. Those are the two key ones that we have. Up until last year, Sedgwick County did a significant number of their own inspections. However, we had taken that over last year, but they do a significant amount of planning, especially as it pertains to air pollution, as it pertains to coming out of what are called mobile sources. And an old friend of mine used to call that planes, trains, and automobiles, is what he used to always call mobile sources. So it is not regulated like the point sources or the large facilities are. So the aid to local dollars that we are able to distribute throughout the state for those particular municipalities, they help us out dearly in regards to the planning, and because they are closer to essentially the source, they have a much better understanding, and we get that they have a much better understanding of what's happening in those particular municipalities. So we certainly want to support that and let them do the planning that allows us to remain in compliance with all of the national ambient air quality standards.
Okay, so with that then, some of these funds, or your expenditures, are going to them for some of their work. But with that, then I'm assuming that they're under your guidance and the same rules and regs that you are required to do, they are required to do.
That is absolutely correct.
Okay, how many, on a different side then, is how many field staff do you have, and are most of your staff back in the office, or a lot of those still working remotely?
Yeah, a number of them are working remotely, although they do come to the office on a periodic basis in order to obtain or in order to get the necessary information or the necessary paperwork that they need to complete permits, for example. There are some staff that are instinctively out in the field. Those that run our air quality monitoring stations, for example, are pretty much out in the field 90% of the time, essentially operating and doing the studies on the ambient monitors. Again, I will mention that the inspectors that we have for this particular program work in a different bureau. They work in the Bureau of Environmental Field Services. It is my understanding we have about 7 of those that are full-time air inspectors, in addition to an additional inspector in Johnson County and 2 in Wyandotte County. So if that gives you a better idea of what we have in regards to field staff.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Got a Gardner and then Baker.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Rick, on your one graph, you're showing that the fund goes under, like October, you have a negative balance, October 24, if I remember correctly. And I'm looking at a spreadsheet which shows the projected increases with class 1, class 2s in 24-25 projected budget. Is that correct?
I'm a little bit at a disadvantage because
I don't know who.
Okay.
I mean, you're showing the class 1s, class 2s kicking in the budget in 24-25 budget year.
Okay.
That
And certainly we could, depending on.
presented that? Or does it say Kansas contractors? Oh, okay. Yeah, I've already, okay, but let's just get to the point. When are you going to need the increases? When do you see that for budgetary purposes? When are you going to need that? In 22?
No, it doesn't, we certainly won't need them in SFY 22. We're looking
Okay,
more.
give me a date.
SFY 25.
Okay, 24, 25, that's where it was,
Right.
I guess, earlier. And then backing up through rules and regs, when are you going to need the authority for these fees? I mean, when do you need to start if you go through rules and regs?
Yeah, we really need to start, we really need to get started sometime later this calendar year. I had seen projections anywhere the September of 2021.
September 21, so it takes 3 years to get a regulation approved
We certainly,
through rules and regs?
and we certainly plan on it taking that long. And if it does not, I mean, we will have essentially it in there that, this regulation will not take effect until July 1st of 2025.
I understand that. I'm trying to look at a calendar to figure out when we need some resolution to this situation. And, I know everybody's been meeting for the last 2 to 3 years. We haven't come, there's been no solution agreed on. And September is right around the corner. It's not too many months away, or let's say the end of 21.
Representative Gardner, let me ask if Leo might chime in on this, our deputy secretary. He has more experience from the standpoint of the regulations because he deals with the regulations from all of the different environmental bureaus. So, and I only have the experience from the standpoint of air. So maybe Leo has a better idea than I do.
Thank you.
Yes, this is Leo Henning, Deputy Director at KDHE Division Environment. And yes, what the plan has been is to make the regulations effective January 1 of 2024. So for those to be in effect January 1 of 2024, we would need to submit our reg package by 1 of 22. Well, 1 of 22 is only 8 months from now, right? So, and we are not allowed to write any regulations until July because of a proviso that was added to the budget last year. So we couldn't even start writing the regulations if we wanted to, and we had agreement with the stakeholders. But come July, we are going to have to be busy writing the reg package so that we can get it started by January of 22, so that they can be effective January of 24, so we can collect fees in January of 25. So that's kind of our timeline, if that helps.
No, that helps. Here's what I don't want to do, just my own personal opinion. I wouldn't want us legislators to get involved unless we have to. And there's still some time. And if this, you can't work out an agreement with all parties, maybe, Mr. Chairman, maybe we ask for an interim, and we have specifically that committee on that interim would oversee this process. But I still think people ought to come to the table and they ought to reach an agreement. That's just my opinion.
This is Leo, just to interject. We are continuing to have discussions. To boil it down, the class ones are on board with what was proposed as the number 2 options. The class 2s have not agreed to that option yet. But we are continuing discussions with just the class 2s to have them provide us a proposal of some type so that we can at least look at it, see if it meets the criteria, and try to come up with a consensus.
Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Leo, thanks for coming on here. You and I have had a lot of discussions about this, and I appreciate that. I really believe that the crutch of this is the increase in expenditures that we've seen, or that we seem to see. It didn't happen in 21. It's going to happen in 22 because of the proviso we put on last year. It couldn't happen in 21. But there is an increase in expenditures in 22. And then there seems to be an increase every year after that. You've put in a 1.5% adjustment, annual adjustment that you want in this proposal. I believe that everybody understands that there does have to be some adjustments in the fees. I don't think anybody is disputing that. I think where the dispute is why do we need this such a big increase, that we're seeing this big increase in expenditures now, because that's what causes the problem in the future. I'm looking at this graph that you gave me, or you gave us for the historical air quality carryover balance, and it's been fairly consistent over the last 20 years. And now all of a sudden, and I understand it's been going down, and there's been fee increases during that time period, but nowhere did it get below 3 million. And now all of a sudden, you're saying it's going to get in the negative in less than 4 years. That's where the problem is. And I was trying my best to get to it with, was it Travis? I'm sorry.
Correct.
Yeah. And so I really would like to see something from the department that shows how many employees you have right now, or how many you had before those that left. I understand if you had some that left, then those need to be filled. How many, and what are your future plans? Are you planning on adding more? This is not going to go away. As the producers do a better job, they're spending millions of dollars every year to produce less emissions, but yet they're getting dinged for it because they're producing less emissions, so they're having to pay more in fees every year. So do you have an answer for that 500,000?
Yeah, let me respond and hopefully this will make a little bit of sense and we can redo the graph based on some of this conversation. But I've had these same conversations with the class twos. And the difference that you're looking at is what you're seeing is the large increase between one fiscal year and the next. And one is the budgeted number and the other one is the actual number. So when you see that large increase, that's our budgeted amount. The year prior, and I don't have the graph right in front of me, is what our actuals are. So we have always budgeted higher than what our actuals are. And so that is why that increase that you see there is because that's our budgeted amount, not our actuals. And we always come in below our budgeted amount. You wouldn't like it if I was over my budget. So we always have our budget and we always come in below it. And it's the budgeted numbers that we have on that graph up to where it spikes up, that's our budgeted amount. We will continue to manage the program far below what our budget is. That's our job to do. But when we need people, if the economy picks up and we start getting lots of requirements for permits, we may have to hire everybody on there to keep caught up like we did when you saw that big spike in about 5 years ago where the class twos were fairly level, all of a sudden they went up. So we have to have the heads so that if the economy picks up and we have to fill people, we don't have to wait a year or two to get positions. We have them there. We don't hire them when we don't need them, but when we do need them, we hire them.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you coming under budget.
So what I can do is we can create that same graph based purely on actuals, throw the budgeted numbers out of it, but realize that we would have an increase in actual expenditures based on history, because things do go up. It still costs more to do things now than it did 10 years ago. So we can reproduce that graph. One of the things that we need to recognize also, though, is we are making all these estimations based on past. We are not going to get the revenues that we estimated for this year. COVID is going to cause probably a 20 to 30% reduction in our emissions fees this year. And that will more than eat up that difference between our actuals and our budget amount. So nothing is perfect. You know, the planning folks do the best they can trying to explain or guesstimate what it's going to be like 2 to 3 years from now. But nothing is ever stagnant. Something is always changing. So that's why we have a little bit of fluff in there as far as budget amount versus actual amounts.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Yeah, if you could get a different graph, I think that would make it easier for us to see exactly. And also, just real quick, so you do not plan on hiring any more people at this time besides those that have already left?
Right. We keep our head count the same. We are not looking at adding additional head count. And like Rick said, we have dropped 3 heads out of our head count this year because we felt that that we would never need them. If you say, I don't believe that you need 9 vacant positions and you should reduce 2 more, that's fine. It's a budgeting thing anyway. We budget for them, and if we need them, we fill them. If we don't need them, we don't fill them. We will not have people sitting around here not doing anything.
Right.
We will only hire people when we have the work to keep them busy.
Leo, hang on a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Baker, Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a real quick question. Are you getting the reports out in a timely fashion right now with the help you have?
Yes, we certainly are.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Carlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just I'm looking at this graph. This is all kind of interesting and a little more detailed than I expected it would be today. But I'm looking at this graph of the historic air quality fee fund graph. And I'm wondering, just can you explain what happened between 2010 and 2014 that caused those balances to go up so high? And can you just talk about that trend?
Yeah,
Between
yes, I
20
certainly can.
Yeah, and then it started coming down, and so why is that? So could you give me just a quick rundown on that? Not too detailed.
You bet. Essentially, in a nutshell, when we see those large spikes in emissions, typically they can be traced to a large fine that was imposed by EPA on a facility inside of Kansas. And when that happens, KDHE or the Bureau of Air gets essentially a portion of that particular fine, which by statute goes into the air fee fund, and that's why periodically you will see these spiked increases in that particular fund.
Well, maybe we need to visit sometime, but it looks like every year it went up and then every year it started going down. And so that wouldn't be like one fine, would it?
No, there will be, there have been certainly more than one year in which we have got major fines.
But it's a group of fines that happened. And so did we learn something from that? Did we crack down? Did we gain? What does that tell us happened with that? Did we clean up the air because of that? And that's why the emissions are down? I mean, I'm curious. The graphs are supposed to talk.
I think it's, quite frankly, to answer your question, I think it's all of the above. Did we get the industry's attention? Yes. Did we clean up the air? Absolutely. Did we have funding? Essentially, those facilities can utilize some of that funding in order to put in pollution control equipment. So did we clean up the air? Most certainly. And I think the numbers reflect that.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Rick.
I've got one question for you. Did EPA perform an audit on the Bureau last year?
Yes, they did on the permitting and the compliance and enforcement.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Committee, do you have any more questions? I'd like to thank you for coming today. And Leo, thank you. And if no other questions, we'll close this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.